I would like to welcome everyone here. Good morning to all of you. My name is Gerald Huebner. I am from Canada, and for those of you that didn't recognize my accent, I was told by several people this morning that they could tell that I wasn't from UK. I learned a new expression. Our Uber driver, as was driving from the airport, I asked him how he was, and I learned a new expression of declaring your condition. He said he was champion. He didn't say he was a champion. He said he was champion. So I like that. It was an expression that wasn't common, or I didn't associate it with that. But I learned a new term and a new way of referring to feeling pretty good. Yeah. So welcome here. I've had the privilege of serving as the chair of the Global Home Education Exchange Council for the last 12 years, and I want to welcome you here. This event, this plenary session, kicks off this conference with a session on what our purpose here is to let the world know why home education works. And we have assembled some of what we consider to be the most articulate apologists, those that can present why home education works, including the proof. And we want to spend some time doing that here with some summary of research and experience around the world. But before I do that, I just want to remind us of what the purpose of Global Home Education Exchange is. Our purpose is to see home education recognized as freely available and respected as a human right of every family in every country, regardless of motivation or methodology. So no matter how you do it or why you do it, no matter where you are, no matter who you are around the world, we want to see home education recognized and freely available for people around this world. How do we do that? The Global Home Education Exchange is an international network. We're not bricks and mortar, we're people that have a mission to advance, to connect, and to equip the global home education community. We do that through an event like this. This is the fourth in-person global conference that has been organized. The first was in Berlin in 2012. After that, we were in Rio de Janeiro in 2016. Then we were in Russia, both St. Petersburg and Moscow in 2018. And then the world changed. We had a pandemic and other things that intervened, so we had a break. And we're now here in Manchester and so happy to be here. We've all experienced so much of the boom of home education, the boom of this alternative to the online learning that was happening all around the world. Parents said, I want something else. And millions did something different. It changed the way that people around the world viewed home, family, and homeschooling. In some places it's called homeschooling, in some places it's called family education, in some places home education, in some places unschooling. There's a variety of titles. But I find that people around the world would say, well, we tried something like that. We did that. And the viewpoint of the population in many countries around the world changed because people kept their kids at home. People became aware of what was happening in the education lives of their children. And most of them said, I don't like what's been happening. And they looked at alternatives. We had in many countries tripling and even quadrupling of homeschool populations. And yes, some people left, but many people stayed and came back. That growth has been phenomenal, beyond what we've ever expected. But there's still issues. There's still challenges in many countries around the world where there's efforts to regulate and to even outlaw this form of education. That's what we're here for, is to work together, to band together, to cooperate, to communicate, to strategize on what can we do as a movement to move ahead the educational choice that parents and families can have. That's who we are. You're part of that. You're part of this movement. That's why we're here. So what I would like to do is I'd like to introduce some of our great friends and allies and speakers who will speak to us this morning about let's tell the world why home education works. And to begin, I can't see most of you very well. I've got these lights shining in my eyes. But to begin, a good friend from here in the United Kingdom, who also spends time in Switzerland, Dr. Paula Rothermel is our first presenter. And as I introduce you as speakers, please just make your way up here to the podium. And because our time is short and our time is tight, I don't see Paula making her way down to, she's coming? Good. Paula has spoken at a number of the global conferences in the past, and I have really appreciated the summary and the perspective that Dr. Rothermel has brought to our events. And I remember so well the presentation that Paula did in Russia, where she summarized the why home education works, and I think it was brilliant, but it was just so connected to the reality and the heart of home education and parents. So, Dr. Rothermel, you homeschooled your own daughter, if I recall correctly, 4 daughters. Okay, my memory is slipping, but so to begin, Paula is a homeschool mom and a researcher, and I think she's eminently qualified to tell us why home education works.
So, right, good morning. I'm going to walk around. If I walk over here, you'll hear me? No, I need to stay there. Okay, I have to stay in one place. Okay, it's not me, but I'll try. Okay, so I thought today actually I would speak for the first time about my research journey into home education, and usually it's not something I talk about, but still. So my first slide is to show you that my home education journey began in Manchester. Actually, that's 1996 when I got the certificate, but 1994 in Manchester was where it began for me. I was sat at Oldham College of Further Education in the library, waiting for somebody, and I picked up a magazine called Child. And at the time, I had no children. Didn't even have a boyfriend or a partner. Is it on? Oh, good. Thanks. Okay, so I didn't have children. I hadn't thought of children. I'm afraid I didn't like children. I didn't like dogs. I didn't like animals or children. I just hadn't thought about it, but I picked up this magazine, and I was incensed. I was furious. There was an article called Is It Legal? And it was about home education, obviously. And I thought, is it legal? If I had children, I'd do what I damn well want with my children. Excuse my swearing. Your children are your children, aren't they? Who's the state to tell you what to do with your children? And so I was shocked and I was incensed, and that's the day that my journey began. But I didn't know it. That was the day my life changed, but it was another 2 years until I was to actually know that had been the day. So the next time I was in the library, I'd been doing an Open University degree, a bachelor's degree in psychology. And again, I'm in a library. And this time in the library, I was reading a poster on the wall while I was queuing up to buy a second-hand book. And the poster was about a taught doctorate in education. And then I got to the front of the desk and the librarian says to me, "You were looking at that poster, does that interest you?" And I said, no, I wouldn't want to do a taught degree and I'm just doing a bachelor's. And she said, well, what would interest you? And I said, well, a research degree, that would interest me. She said, what subject? And I said, I was reading this article 2 years ago and I'm still angry. And she said, actually, the librarian's on her coffee break. I'm head of research degrees. Come to my office in the morning. And before I knew it, I was a doctoral candidate at the University of Durham. So that, as you can imagine, was amazing. And I never applied. I was just absorbed. I somehow became a research candidate, a doctoral candidate. And then through that journey, I got to meet Roland Mayen, who I would like to, I'm just going to put his face up here. Am I? Roland Mayen. He is like the father of home education research. He was an expert witness in a very famous case that defined education in this country, or defined the definition of education in this country. Roland was always very funny. So when it came to my PhD, the viva, to get my PhD, my supervisor said, whatever you do, we can't have Roland Mayen. I said, why not? He said, he's as nutty as a fruitcake. So I went to Roland and said, you know, David Galloway says you're as nutty as a fruitcake. He said, I am. And that's how I achieve so much, because I always ask for the unimaginable. And then whatever I get is going to be more than I wanted, more than I expected. So not more than I wanted, more than I expected. And I thought, that's great. Anyway, over time, I did have children. I had 4 of them. And I was doing my research. And I don't know if this resonates with everybody, but you know, the second-hand salesman, double glazing salesman that comes to the house. And I was like that. I'd never thought before about children, but then I had the children. I'd now done the research. I'd been to hundreds of houses of home educators, and I'd sold my own product to myself. There I had been I was neutral, independent, doing my own research. But I saw over and over again that home education works. And it really does work. And I was all over the United Kingdom seeing how it worked. And I was picking out the best bits for myself as I went along. And so when the time came, yes, I was home educating as well. And the funny thing was that people always said, oh, your research is positive because you're a home educator. And I go, hold on, I wasn't a home educator when I started. But anyway, at some point I thought I was going to get little Einsteins and what else? Musicians for my own children. But still, I wanted more for them. And what I got is plenty. And they've all done very nicely from their home education. So I know it works. Let me go back to my notes. I bet my computer's gone to sleep. No, it hasn't. Right. So it does work. It works. I know it works. I've seen it work. I've seen for years and years and years it works. I've done it with my own family after the fact, and I've also found it worked for me too. When I moved to Switzerland in 2007, what was really interesting is that I didn't know it, but I moved to a place in Switzerland where children didn't start school until their 8th year. So when I got there, the children were all playing in the playgrounds. My children could just go out in the morning and run free, and they were there with other children doing the same thing as them, although they weren't officially home educating, but the children weren't at school. And that gave me a view of some kind of utopia where children weren't attending school from 4, as they tend to be in the United Kingdom. Home education is great because it's bespoke. It fosters a lifelong love of learning. And what I found from my own research is that not only is it good for the children, but it's good for the parents. I think probably about, I can't quite remember, maybe 30% of the parents in my study had finished their own education early. And by home educating, they started to learn alongside their children. And I found that a fascinating area for further research, which I haven't pursued, but hopefully somebody will. I now come from a long line of older researchers. I'm afraid Alan, Harriet, sorry? Thank you so much. Alan Thomas, Roland Mayen. Who else? Amanda Petrie, Stephen Loudon, Brian Ray, my hero when I was doing my PhD. And now we've got the young ones coming up. We've got Catherine Sunshine from Ireland, the bright new hope of Ireland, and those from the United Kingdom. And I look forward to seeing the research that's going to take us forward. I think we need to be asking for more than we're getting and follow the route of Roland Mayen. Always ask for more, peacefully, inch by inch, ask for more, and then in that way, step by step, move forward. In closing, no. One word from my home education, from my research, when I asked parents to define home education with one word, so many of them spoke of joy, the joy of home educating, the joy it brings the family, the joy it brings the children, the joy it brings the parents. So in closing, I leave you with this thought. If necessity is the mother of invention, then home education is the mother of innovation. It's adaptable, it's personal, and it works. Thank you very much.
Dr. Rothermel, Paula, thank you so much. As I've had an occasion to travel around the world, Dr. Rothermel is one of the people that I have had the privilege of quoting, in that one of the things that she summarized in an earlier presentation was that the reason that home education works is because parents love their children. And parents that are home educating, of course, say, like, excuse the colloquialism, but duh. It's quite obvious, but it's not always obvious to the world. And I thank Dr. Rothermel for her leadership and research in pointing out the reality of joy, the reality of love, and that being the heart of home education. It's a privilege to have our next presenter with us. Liz Gitonga is from Kenya, and Liz is the leader of the East Africa Homeschool Organization and is a director and a board member of the advisory board of the Global Home Education Exchange Council. And Liz will be talking to us about home education works in Kenya. Liz, welcome, and we look forward to your comments.
Good morning, everyone. I actually cannot see, but I hope you can see me. Yeah, a pleasure, a privilege, a joy to be sharing about home education and that home education works in Africa, home education works in Kenya. And I'll come to this picking up incidentally right from where our previous presenter ended and your remarks on that. The understanding that home education is founded in love. And this is a reflection of why I chose to home educate, part of the reason why I chose to home educate, but also what I have seen in observing and supporting many families in Kenya who are homeschooling. I was trained as a teacher and I had 2 degrees in education and I loved to teach. And in my second school that I went to teach in, there was a young man named Raymond who was he had very little self-esteem. But I only got to know about Raymond because in the staff room, all the teachers laughed at him. And that was horrible. That was my first experience being in a staff room where I saw the opposite of love. And they said, it's so good to mark Raymond's papers because it's so easy. I don't need any time. It's always a 0. And that really disturbed me. And I thought, why is Raymond always getting a 0? It's 1%. So a teacher doesn't need to spend time, reading through the whole script. And I decided I would find out what's wrong with Raymond. And Raymond was in my math class. And Raymond actually did not understand when I gave instruction to the class. I could see that. All the students are doing their work, but Raymond is stuck with his pencil just waiting to, I don't know, perhaps for the bell to go. And so I asked Raymond, would you like to meet at break time? And let's see whether I can help you with these math questions. And we began meeting with Raymond at break time, at lunchtime, just any time we could get. And he used to get really 0% in math. And he began getting 5%, 10%. And I was excited. And Raymond's demeanor began changing as his grades improved. And as I worked together with him, and he saw that he is able because the system told him, you cannot. Then he began standing tall. Raymond would always come to school in very ragged clothes. His shirt was not clean. It wasn't tucked in. He walked with a stoop. And Raymond's demeanor began changing. And he stood upright. He began tucking in his shirt. He began playing with other kids. That was progressive over a period of perhaps a year or so. And the teachers in the staff room started noticing a difference. And they knew I was meeting with Raymond at the break times. And they asked me, what are you doing? At that time, Mrs. Gitonga, what are you doing? What's happening with Raymond? He's changing. And I said, Raymond can learn. He's just needs attention. He needs to be taught in the way he learns best. Because Raymond did not learn like the average student would learn. He had his special learning needs, but Raymond was a bright kid. He just needed attention and love that would build his confidence. And that worried us because that worried me. I thought, what will happen to my kids? Will they end up with the teachers, like the teachers that were in our staff room? And so home education works in Kenya because we do not have teachers who are able, even when they want to meet with their children one-on-one. By the time, that was like 20 years ago. Right now, our public schools have students who are 70 students in a classroom, 80 students in a classroom. I've said this in my previous talks. But home education is founded in love, and so it works. And home education, too, does not need competition. I thought every child needs to compete with another child so that we can see the best of them. But home education does not need competition. Home education needs love. Home education is teaching each child according to their design, their individuality. And that's what we are seeing in Kenya as more and more students are dropping off the school system for various reasons. But when they come to home education, then they begin to thrive. Raymond's story has been multiplied over and over again. And it is a joy then to be part of this community, to say that home education does work in Kenya, in Africa, and across the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz. Our next, I'm going to ask my colleague Tim Vince, who's a advisory board member on the Global Home Education Exchange from UK. And Tim is involved in particularly the advocacy subcommittee. And Tim, you're going to be introducing our next special guest. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I love that England flag being waved there. Not that I'm in any way prejudiced for the final against Spain. I'm absolutely honored to, I'm in a similar state that I can't see Samuel George, who I'm introducing, but I'm speaking in faith now. He's a member of Parliament. He represents the Ninjo Pram Pram constituency in eastern Ghana. He's currently serving in his second term. Congratulations. Before first being elected to Parliament in 2016, he served as the Assistant Director of the Civil Service and then as Communications Director to the President of Ghana. He holds multiple degrees, including from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, the London School of Economics, and the University of London, where both of my kids went. Member of Parliament, Samuel George, thank you so much.
A very good morning to you. I wonder if I'm qualified to stand here because I'm actually attending my very first conference and I'm here to learn because homeschooling is a new and growing phenomenon in Ghana. But the reason why I accepted to be here is as someone who believes that education is a fundamental right that belongs to parents. And as someone who's found myself in the House of Legislature, I honestly believe that it's important that as politicians, we understand what homeschooling is about. Because working both in the civil service and then moving into the executive and now in the legislature, I realized that the default position as politicians is to fight what we don't understand. And that's our default position. Once we don't understand the subject, once we don't understand what it's about, we shut it down, we fight it, or we try to legislate it to control it. And for me, I just want to have a fair understanding what it means to homeschool. It's important that we get more members of parliament and more politicians to understand the benefits. From yesterday's welcome reception to the talks that I've witnessed this morning, I'm getting a better perspective of what homeschooling is, what the potentials are. And I think later on today, I'm going to be speaking at my main plenary, where I'm going to be speaking about how the homeschooling community can work with politicians to make this a mainstream event or a mainstream phenomenon that is not legislated for control, but legislated to support and expand the frontiers. Because I listened to Liz talk about 70, 80 children in the classroom in Kenya. It's a very similar thing in Ghana. In my constituency, where I represent, there are classrooms where I have 140 children in a classroom that shouldn't hold anybody more than 20 children. So homeschooling takes a lot more people out of the classroom and takes away resources that the government is spending right now on public education. But yes, I see the UK flag. I wish there was a Ghanaian flag, but that's my cue to stop. Thank you very much.
And now it's my great pleasure to invite Deputy Elvia Yolanda Martinez Cosio. You represent the 1st District of, is it Jalisco in the Mexican Congress, currently serving in your 3rd term. And before Elvia's election to Congress in 2018, she served as president of the Political Affairs Commission of the Institute of Mexicans Abroad, and in a number of consulting and community development roles in the private sector, including in Chicago, USA. And you have a lot of experience of both USA and Mexico. Elvia holds degrees from the University of Guadalajara and the Colegio de la Frontera Norte, including a doctorate in education. Did I make all the pronunciations correct?
It's correct.
Yeah, very well. You're an honorary Englishman for your politeness to me. Thank you very much.
It's an honor for me today to start with everybody. I know my experience is about a migrant person, but this is the first time in Mexico is a legislator about the name is a deputy migrant in Mexico. And for me, it's very important about the homeschooling education, because it's an opportunity for people have children, small children, and is deporting or returning to Mexico, they can stay in home schooling. This is the first time a legislator to present a bill in Mexico, and it's approved about the home education. It's an honor for me have this kind of programs, because home education is very important for everybody. Home education is growing every day, and it's an honor for all the legislators. We need to continue this job. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. The purposes of the GHEX are certainly to work together with legislators and policymakers from around the world to improve and advance the freedom of home education. Our next presenter is a good friend, a director, a board member of the Global Home Education Council Advisory Board. Sameera Mohammed comes to us from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Sameera is a homeschool mom, first of all, and her children are actually with her here at the conference, and it's great to see them involved in all of this. And I've had the privilege of being with Sameera in a number of places and seeing her children in action at things like the World Geography and History competition. So Sameera, great to be with you again, and welcome here, and we're looking forward to your sharing about your experience in UAE, which is a really special place.
Yes, thank you so much. So
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our discussion on why home education works. Well, this is my favorite topic, and I can go on for days talking about this. Sadly, I can't do that today. Let me extend a warm marhaba from Abu Dhabi, where I have a pleasure of residing. And we were fortunate to homeschool our wonderful 4 children in Abu Dhabi. We converted them now. They are now home education experts and advocates, and you'll be meeting 2 of them speaking tomorrow. I think I wanted my slide up now. So if you can, oops. Okay, thank you. So it's definitely, it's important for you to have this perspective, and overall it's a home education conference. You see the tiny little country that I pointed, that's what UAE is. And UAE is very unique to have an expatriate population of 89%. And this 89% comprises of more than 200 nationalities. So it's just really a unique place to be in. And homeschooling, it just works wonders if you are with mixed communities. Children learn to interact and exchange cultures and learn more, which we want our kids to be more tolerant of each other. So this is really one of the ways we homeschool in the UAE, learning from each other. We have a very safe and welcoming community. I'm proudly a member of a thriving home education association in Abu Dhabi. And as you can see, and there are some of them are homeschooled online. There's a culture which is growing, online education. Our kids have been doing eclectic and mixed version of homeschooling. So they have, currently there are 89% of expatriates, and there is diverse educational preferences in the expatriate community. Home education remains unregulated in the UAE and many Middle Eastern countries, but this is, it works in our favor, and we are able to do it. We have the freedom to do how we want to home educate our children. Within the UAE, there are approximately 10 to 15% of national students, and there are a lot of students from our home education community who have taken part in regular school competitions and have achieved great results, namely Model UN, World Scholars Cup, History Bean Bowl, which Gerald was talking about. And we had the privilege of making significant impact, and sometimes being in the schools premises, we've been proudly awarded as homeschoolers because we shine wherever our children go and participate. So home education is definitely getting very popular in the region, and we are also influencing the countries around us, which is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. The future looks really bright in these countries because we're able to do what we want to do. So thank you very much for being here today, and I hope to learn much more from all of you in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you, Sameera. It was interesting when we had the opportunity to go to the UAE and be with Sameera. The international flavor was something that just blew me away. It was just like stepping into the United Nations in joining the education. Is my hero, Dr. Brian Ray, and my good friend Ray. Dr. Ray has spent his life working on home education research and really being a champion for it, and it's a privilege to be able to introduce him. What he's going to talk to us about is what does the research say and why does home education work? And Brian, you've talked about this a time or two, haven't
A
you?
few times, yeah.
So welcome
But
here.
thank you, Gerald. But first, does this thing work? But we're going to do philosophy of research first, okay? And I know there's a timekeeper. Here we go. We're not wasting any time on that. So, does parent-directed, family-based private home education work? I think this begs the question, does government-controlled public education work? That's the real question. We got to flip this around philosophically and in terms of research. It all depends on your target. Everybody knows this. What is your target? If you can define works, you have to say what your target is. So to do that, you have to think about your philosophy. You have to think about what do you believe is real? How do you come to know what is real? And how do you decide what is of value? And you know that's your epistemology, your metaphysics, and your axiology. All of that's important. So we have to define work before we can say whether it works. And all the researchers in here know that. We like to think we're objective, unbiased. We don't have anything, preconceived notions. That's false. In this room alone, probably there are many different worldviews represented. It could be atheist, statist, secular humanist, socialist, pragmatist, utilitarian, critical race theorist, LGBTQIAist, Muslim, Jew. Got to throw that on the floor. Christian, that's where I fall in line there. So now you know my biases. We all of these, though, might have some commonalities in terms of what we value. I'm sure they do. AV man, okay. In the end, each person's beliefs about what is of value drives how we can decide or say what works. Over 35 years ago, Dr. Gregory Cizik wrote an article, The Mismeasure of Homeschooling. And I know in this room, different individuals, including the researchers, all have different ideas about exactly what works. And so what Paula measures, what Sylvia measures, all depends on partly what they think is of value. And we could say, well, what works? Is it a high test score on the PISA International Test? Is it a high score on the SAT in America? Is it a high score on the California Achievement Test? What works? Or is it being normal in your society? Or is it being a free thinker? Is it being somebody who likes to learn and likes to learn for life? Is it fulfilling your government's decision about how many welders and carpenters and engineers should be in the workforce? Is it going to a university and getting a high-paying job? Is it getting married and having children and loving them and nurturing them? Is it loving the God of the Bible and passing that on to your children? Or is it something else in this room? Now let me move on to the research findings because we have to lay the groundwork of philosophy before we can decide whether it works. That's the point. So what I've noticed in the last 40 years is that there kind of are about now 5 emerging main things about whether it works. And again, the researchers can argue all day about this, but one of them is academic achievement. Whether you think it's important or not, people care about it. When I did a review, the most recent review of 19 peer-reviewed studies on academic achievement, 63% of them found that the home educated are doing statistically significantly better. Not all, but on average, better. By the way, if you want this talk I'm giving, just send me an email, I'll send it to you. And that is, the other percentage are not doing worse, they're doing about the same, or maybe a few little mixed findings on that. Second area is social emotional adjustment. Of course, anybody who homeschools, here's the question, what about socialization? Okay, just fill in the blank. Of 22 peer-reviewed studies, 64% of them find that home-educated children are doing statistically significantly better at all kinds of measures, self-concept, not being alcoholics, not going to jail, all those kinds of things. However you want to measure it, they're doing better. And then another category is success in adulthood. And of 20 peer-reviewed studies so far, 50% find that the home educator are doing statistically significantly better in terms of how they're doing in life, satisfaction, college success, college GPA, whatever you want to call it, about 50%. The other 50%, no big differences, maybe a few mixed findings on that. Another category that's emerging a little bit, and this gets more to what Dr. Gregory Cizik was talking about, is the transmission of values. Again, we have all these different worldviews in here, And each parent, whether they want to admit it or not, usually wants to transmit their values to their children. We might say we don't, we might say we're totally open about it, but most of us want to transmit our values. A little bit of research has been done on that so far, and we find that overall home education is more successful, if you want to call it that, in transmitting the values of the parents to the children. And then the fifth category, what I would call learner outcomes, so to speak, and this is where we get into a very sensitive topic, and that is, does home education, more or less or the same, cause what anybody might call direct harm to children? And we usually think about that in terms of abuse, neglect, and child fatalities. And I know that's a pretty important topic in a lot of places. We don't have much research on that so far. We have a few studies. Dr. Shaquille and I got to finish a pretty, what I think is significant one a year and a half ago that's been very important in the United States of America and maybe in some other countries. So far what we find is that roughly about no difference between children who are in home education and those in institutional schools, maybe a slight positive for those who are home educated in terms of abuse and neglect and fatalities. What I'd like to mention here is some people say, well, aren't you just an advocate of homeschooling? I mean, after all, and I want to flip that around again. If you have your children in public schools and you make the most of your money as a university professor off of government schools, maybe you have a bias. My interest is in what is good for children, and I have to deal with this all the time in court cases. So far, there is no body of research that suggests that home education harms children. When I say body of research, there might be a study here or there that maybe finds no difference or a little mixed, findings, but no body of research. It's possible that home education actually causes positive things. I happen to think that theoretically, and I'll give you a long list fast because he's going to flash 2 minutes at me here soon. But some people say, well, but what about all these limitations on research? Some of you know I've been attacked, others have been attacked about research. Here's the point. All social science research, including what some people call hard sciences, biological, physical, chemical, they all have limitations. It doesn't necessarily mean they're flawed. It just means they have limitations. You have to be careful how you make extensions from the research. Yes, it's a hard-to-reach population. Yes, it's hard to get perfectly representative samples. But I say to negative critics, you do the study, and you do the perfect study, and you find out how it harms children. But so far, that hasn't happened. And I don't know why, but maybe it's because there's nothing in it for them. I don't know. Why would home education not work? I mean, let's look at this. Abraham in the Bible, did he need a government certified teacher? I don't think so. Did Abraham Lincoln need a government certified teacher? Did the Bronte sisters need tax-funded government certified teachers? No. I mean, so you just go on and on. But if you look at research on education in general, I'm going to make a real fast list for you. Parental involvement, more is better for children. Smaller class size is better for children. More turns of conversation between teacher and student is better for children. More academic and engaged time. Mastery learning, higher expectations, mentoring, apprenticeships, tutoring, less distraction, less bullying, more flexibility, more customization, more individualization, more social capital, more safer environment, value consistency, less peer dependency, less foolishness all day long. All of these things in the general literature are connected with children learning more. And so what I tell people is that it's not that somebody here in this room, maybe me, is an advocate of H word, homeschooling or home education, is that all of these things that are systemically a part of the very nature of home education are available in home education, and whether parents are perfect at all of these things or not, they're associated with more learning and more joy in learning. And the love of the parents, all these things that we've already talked about, and that means I got to finish up. It is essentially an individualized education program. And I believe, in my worldview, that when we do things that God designs, and some of you don't believe in that worldview, but you just look at nature around you, which, by the way, comes from God. When you do things that God designs, we do well. We do well. That's what happens. And keep in mind that success has been going on for thousands of years, and during the modern home education movement, without government certified teachers, I've been one, by the way, without professors of education, without research, without $17,000 US, or 7,000 or 4,000 that some people are pushing in America now for home education. All of this relative success has been done without those things for thousands of years and the past 40 years. So does home education work and why? I've given you some ideas. If you want to talk about more research, we'll talk later. Bye-bye.
Brian, thank you so much. Brian is an organization. He has an organization called NERI, which is the National Home Education Research Institute. My brain went blank there just for a moment. I certainly know it well, but he has a booth in the exhibit area. One of the great things about this conference is being able to sit and talk, have coffee with, and chat with people like Brian and so many others, and I would just encourage you to do that. Our next presenter, Edric Mendoza. Edric, come on up. Edric is from the Philippines. Edric is also a board member of the Global Home Education Exchange Advisory Board. Edric is a Energizer bunny. Edric exerts his energy. His card, at least the last one I saw, said he was an edupreneur. So he basically builds educational systems. I know he's in the process of founding a college and much, much more. So Edric, I look forward to your sharing about home education working in the Philippines, but I know it's not just limited to the Philippines. It's much bigger than that. So welcome here.
Good morning. Let me greet you from the Philippines. And if you can say this with me, say mabuhay. Mabuhay. Quick snapshot of the Philippine landscape. There's about 115 million Filipinos. We are one of the largest populations in the world, in the top 15, across 7,100 islands. So what does it look like? Why is home education working in our country with that number? I want to give you the ABCs. So of that number, there's about 26.2 million students, K through 12, in school or school-aged. And of that base, what is more important is the 3.3 million that are in private schools. 3.3 million in private schools. So when you look at the homeschooling world in the Philippines, there's about 15,000 to 300,000, depending on the data, because it has changed given the pandemic. So that's about 0.5 to 9% of the private school. And we want to measure based on that just because the public school system is really, really challenged, if you will, in the Philippines. So the ABCs: A, acceptance; B, builders; and C, change. There's so many ways to skin, the answer to that question, why is home education working in the Philippines? But I'll use ABCs. A, acceptance. We're fortunate to be able to work with our local government and various stakeholders so that it is generally accepted in the Philippines. So much so that in 2022, as the pandemic was waning, we were able to form a home education framework with the government that is now the regulatory guideline used for the Philippine homeschoolers and education sector. We were privileged to be part of that. So that's one example. And because there's been such great acceptance amongst many stakeholders, not only is it free to be able to do so in the Philippines, but we have our own National Homeschooling Day, every year celebrated on March 3rd. So acceptance is generally what we're seeing as why it's working. We also see it's very popular in mainstream, social media. Filipinos are one of the top, if not the top, consumers of social media in the world, and you can Google that or ChatGPT that. And the social media influencers are also homeschooling. There are a number of key homeschooling families who are social media influencers. So it has become mainstream. So A, acceptance is a main reason why it's working, or we're seeing it gain ground in the Philippines. B, builders. As the pandemic hit and really rocked the whole world, what we saw is, if back in the day, over 2 decades ago, when we were starting to get involved in homeschooling, there were maybe 5 or 6 builders or leaders trying to make things happen for home education or homeschooling in the Philippines. There's now about 85, and it continues to grow. So a lot of builders and leaders who are helping push this forward is another reason why we're seeing it grow and work in the Philippines. The last, to keep to my time, is C. and I'll get a little bit personal with you. So I'm a dad with 6 kids. Last I checked, all from my wife and I, who's over there. And I just celebrated my birthday recently. And as I look back at not just my family and our children, but what we've been able to be privileged to see in the homeschooling world with amazing leaders like our dear friends, the Gallaghers there, I realized that the real personal answer to why we think it is working in our country is something that a mom shared with me when I was doing my research as I was finishing a certificate of advanced education leadership at the Harvard Graduate School. She said, when I interviewed her, I said, why do you homeschool? Why do you think it's working? She said these lines, and I'll close with this thought because this is really from my heart why I think it is working. She said, homeschooling homeschooled me. You see, the reason why I keep going and the reason why I'm such an energizer bunny, as Gerald says, is because of the change. We've seen it change our family. My wife just shared with me the other month. She said, honey, I think arguably this is the best decision we have made as a family. And we see this in more and more families like our friends, the Gallaghers, and so many others. And so that, I believe, is the secret to why it continues to work. Thank you, guys.
Edric, thank you so much. It's a privilege to serve together with you and to work together with you in the Global Home Education Exchange. We have so much to say in so little time, but we have one more presenter, and I'm thrilled to be able to introduce to you Stephanie Lambert. Stephanie's a good friend. Stephanie comes to us from Texas. She's the executive director of the Texas Homeschool Coalition, or maybe the president. But Stephanie is a product. I have had the privilege of meeting Stephanie many times over the years as we've attended homeschool leadership conferences in the United States, and we had the privilege of having our daughter, who is about the same age as Stephanie, be a good friend and spend time together. But Stephanie, her presentation, it says, I'm the proof of home education working. A graduate story. So Stephanie, I'm just thrilled that you're here together with us in Manchester. Welcome here and look forward to your sharing.
Well, as Gerald said, I was home educated in the United States of America thanks to the work of pioneers like Dr. Brian Ray and my parents and Gerald and many, many others. Today, I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization that serves families. We support the families of 750,000 home-educated students in the state of Texas. Today, as a home-educated graduate, I get to dedicate my life to supporting families, to protecting families and parents' ability to home educate. I get to dedicate my life to advocating for these families. At our organization, we do that through the courts, we do that in the legislature, we do that through government agencies. And this is what I am privileged to do today. I've heard this morning in Kenya, there are 170 kids in classrooms, there are 70 kids in classrooms. Around the world, educators are facing many challenges, and many of them are common challenges. We see a lack of quality teachers. We see a lack of people pouring into children in their early developmental ages. We see a great need for character development in students. I am blessed to say that because of my home education, I believe that I was able to avoid these and many other issues that students around the world are facing today. My parents decided to homeschool in the 1980s and the 1990s. And for us, that looked like my mom teaching myself and my 3 siblings her 4 students. And she taught us in our little desks that had those built-in tables with the hole underneath for all your books. And she taught us at the kitchen table. And she taught us as we ran errands to the grocery store and to the post office and to the bank. My parents invested in us and they taught us. They were dedicated to our development in our early stages. They taught us to talk, and they taught us to walk, and they taught us to eat. And then for them, it was just natural that that ended up going into teaching us academics. So then they became very focused in the 80s and the 90s on the academics of my siblings and me. They worked with private school curriculum providers to have curriculum to be able to teach us. They used books in libraries. They collaborated with a few other parents who were doing the same thing to give us classes. They were really focused on our academics as well. And it was efficient. I remember waking up early, and if I really dedicated myself as a child, I could finish my school in 2 or 3 hours in the morning. And then do you know what I did after that? I played. And that is the work of children. And then as I got older, I could still finish my homework in the school day, and I had the rest of the day to do other things. My parents gave us an efficient education, and they were dedicated to our academics, but they were also very focused on our character. And they did that in many ways. I can remember, for instance, gardening with my parents, and I learned discipline, and I learned hard work, and I learned that squash just grows and grows and grows. We had squash coming out of our ears. My parents, they took us to visit our elderly friends. And I learned about giving and learning from those people. We traveled. We traveled to almost every state in the United States of America when our friends were sticking to their public school schedules. Even more than that, my parents were involved. They were involved in government. They were involved in their community. They were involved in our church. And you know what they did? They took us with them. And so we were involved too. My home education affected almost every aspect of my life. I am here today to say that home education for my siblings and me allowed us to thrive. Home education laid the groundwork that we needed to be successful in life. Thank you very much.
Stephanie, thank you so much. And to all our presenters, thank you for your investment of time and energy in preparing and being here. I would encourage all of you in the audience to take the time to network, to talk to the presenters, to talk to the exhibitors. The opportunity is too good to pass up. If you see somebody walking around with a button that says, "Ask me," those are people that have volunteered to answer whatever questions you have. Not the question about, where's the nearest taxi or those kinds of things, but in terms of home education, ask them about home education. That concludes this plenary session. I again thank you all, and we'll have a break now, and then the workshops will begin shortly after that. So enjoy the break, take the time to visit, and thank you for your attention.